The first story I want to talk about, and the next two are pretty funny too, stick around. But the first one I want to talk about are the first two amendments, which is the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. And we're in the process of both of them being up for grabs. Before, they were both pretty much undebatable on liberal and conservative sides. At different time in history, it was the liberals and the conservatives who came for the free speech. I remember when I was younger, sometimes conservatives get salty about rap music and such. And now you have the liberals who are intolerant to jokes. And I like dark humor. I saw my friend Rob come in. I don't know if he's here, but my friend Rob Jesse, he's a comedian. He does dark humor. And I personally like messed up humor as well. So I see now it's a lot of the liberals coming for comedy. Although I will say conservatives do too with abortion jokes. Anyway, it's long been known that freedom of speech is important regardless of what politics you want to support for many reasons. You have the right to disagree with your government. That's very important. You have the right to disagree and talk down to your politicians. Freedom of speech is great. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump. He's no dictator. I mean, all of the press is anti-Trump. If Trump was a dictator, you'd have no press speaking out against him. He's not. That's why everybody is openly, outwardly against him, and nothing happens. They get sponsorships, they get Nike deals, they get new movies, they get relevant careers when nobody cared about them, like Tom Arnold and such. No disrespect, but it's true. Anyway, it's very important to have freedom of speech. And we're slowly losing that here. It's been lost in Europe. They don't have true free speech because once the government gets a footing in free speech, then it's game over. And a lot of the tech companies have done it, saying we're just a private company, which is true. But in Europe, they say hate speech is a law now, but it's very, very broad. It's just like the YouTube and Patreon terms of service where, they say, well, that's hate speech, but they don't. What is hateful? To somebody who hates the truth is hate speech. To somebody who can't take a joke is hate speech. To somebody who doesn't like something that's offensive and everything's offensive, then almost everything could be hate speech if they're in power. And that's starting to happen in Europe, and it's designed that way. And there's a reason that the United States has been successful for hundreds of years. Many great empires fall. The United States has not yet, because largely, other things as well. We have the right to speak out against our government. We have the right to speak out against politicians. We have the right to speak out against celebrities. We have the right to speak out against social norms, but we're starting to slowly lose that on the right. I know it happens on the left too. Anytime you're an anti-war journalist on the left wing, then all of a sudden they want to shut you up, silence you, take your money, and make sure that you never speak again. If you're a right-wing superstar, such as Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos. If you ever watch a Milo video, Milo is hilarious. I'm sorry, I don't agree with everything he says. I can't justify every mistake he's ever made in his life. But Milo was a threat because he's gay. He is married to a black guy. He's Jewish. You can't put this guy in a box. He's everything the SJWs claim to stand for. But he's super funny, super intelligent, very conservative, and not afraid to make a very messed up joke. He's pretty much, a normal standard comedian, provocateur, intellectual pundit. He's pretty much blacklisted. You have Roseanne, who's not even a true conservative, pretty much blacklisted. You have Alex Jones, has been all but blacklisted, and he does great interviews with Ron Paul. He does great interviews with right-wing people. He does great interviews with Louis Farrakhan. That's one of my favorite Louis Farrakhan interviews ever. Alex, the Christian, Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, that's a clash of cultures, but they came out of the love and said, let's put all our disagreements aside and see what we agree with. It's a really amazing interview, and Farrakhan, surprisingly, even says that Trump is right to vet refugees. You wouldn't expect someone from the Nation of Islam to say that Trump should vet the refugees because they hate America. But Louis Farrakhan, although, I disagree with him on a lot of things, he has a lot of wisdom. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. And like I said, I don't agree with everything Louis Farrakhan says. He definitely hates certain people that I don't hate, including myself. He probably doesn't even like me. But overall, Alex was a platform that really got the discussion flowing that you wouldn't normally hear on the news. Whether you love it or hate it, it's gone. It's all but gone. So not only is our First Amendment under attack already via social media companies and such deplatforming, mass deplatforming, you also have people now that the Democrats are in control of the House, they're going to start to pass legislation to get the hate speech, I know in New York City, I'm pro-LGBT, as pro as you could be, but they passed a gender X in New York City, which means that it's a new gender or something. That's their footing. They use the LGBT community. They did it in the UK. They did it in Canada. The government now demands that you use certain pronouns, and maybe to some people, oh, that makes sense. We don't want to offend anybody. But now you just gave the government power to decide what is hate speech, and you gave the government to decide what you do and say in certain situations, even if it doesn't make sense. It's programming you to do what's not right and feel okay with being censored when you do say the truth. I don't care what your opinion is on this, that, or the other, but you have your right to say it. But that's where they start. And in Germany, you can't question history and many other things. I mean, if you critique the refugee crisis, which is a crisis, it doesn't fare well for you. In the UK, you could get arrested over a Facebook quote, even if that Facebook quote or speech is actually accurate, but maybe it's a little mean, maybe it's a little harsh, maybe it's a little upsetting to people. But what is hate speech? And as someone who's been liberal my whole life, the liberals have no tolerance for humor. They have no tolerance anymore for opposing opinions. Everything's racist, sexist, fascist, when we know it's really not. So I already know not to trust them. It's not like, I wonder what they do with it. I could just look around the world and be like, okay, these people should not touch the freedom of speech, and neither should Republicans, but they're not trying to right now. Let's go on to the Second Amendment. It's very, very important. It's the right to bear arms. And I'm going to have more discussions about the Second Amendment because it's not popular. They're already starting to censor pro-Second Amendment content because that's how they do in any society. I don't want to exaggerate, but in the Armenian genocide, and like I said, this is an extreme version, but it's the same psychology. In the Armenian genocide, before they killed and murdered millions of Christians, they first killed and rounded up all the intellectual leaders. Because if you don't have your thought leaders, if you don't have your Milos and Alex Jones and Trumps and others, you have no leadership. You're just a bunch of sheep running in circles. And they did that. They rounded up the intellectuals first, and then it was easy to murder millions of people. I'm not saying they're doing that here, but that is the strategy that's been used throughout history. If you leave people leaderless and powerless, then you can then take advantage of them. Very simple. They've already all but done that with the Second Amendment. They're weaving their way towards total fascism, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, whatever you want to call it, control. And they're halfway there. They're not going to get all the way there, and America's a tricky, tricky banana, for lack of a better fruit, but they're going. And I want to debunk a lot of Second Amendment things that for some reason people don't understand or they lie about. There's an old saying in America, I've always thought this way, even before I was really super pro-Second Amendment like I am now. I always supported the Second Amendment, even when I was liberal, because I understood it's to protect against government tyranny. It's not there to go duck hunting. It's not there to feel good or act tough. It's there because if the government ever does something tyrannical or we ever get invaded from another country, like the old saying is, there's a gun behind every blade of grass. And it's a beautiful thing when you really think about it. No one's going to invade America. No leader's going to push it too far because we're all armed. That's why, there's a famous Alex Jones, not to keep referencing him, but there's a famous interview of his with Piers Morgan where he says, Hitler took the guns, Stalin took the guns, Mao took the guns. And he's 100% right, whether you love him or hate him. That's what they did, because once you leave the public defenseless, you can get away with anything. There's no way to defend themselves. And similar to freedom of speech, if they can't speak out against you and they can't defend themselves from you, then you're just sitting ducks for any sort of totalitarian government. And they're coming for the First Amendment, and they're already, the House is not even reopened, or maybe today was the first day or something. And they're already talking about legislation for universal background checks. Okay, you want to do that. You want to take away bump stocks. That's fine. But trust me, just like with the LGBT move into freedom of speech, they're not going to stop until they justify taking all automatic rifles. Well, you don't need an automatic rifle. Yeah, of course, not to harm others, but to protect yourself. I mean, in crazy times, it might be useful. You might not think it now because we've lived such a great life, but during the Hitler regime or the Stalin regime, if you had an automatic rifle, it'd be a lot easier to defend yourself than maybe a pistol or something that's not automatic, whatever. I get why people would want them, and it's not something out of the realm. Like, that could never happen. It's happening in other countries. You have open air slave markets in Libya. You have a lot of other problems in Africa. You have racial problems. You have, religious extremist problems. There's problems in the world today that are equipped. You have genocides, whatever you think about what's going on in Yemen, there's a starvation and a blockade. So to defend yourself, these things could happen here. It's not out of the realm. It's happened. Germany used to be half the world or take over half of Europe. Now they're the size of like Rhode Island. It happened. Life came really fast for Germany. They were taking over the world. Now they're pretty much nothing. So these things happened in our lifetime, and in people who are alive now in their lifetime. It's very, very important. When I say these things, a lot of people that don't agree with me, they'll say, well, what do you think? You're going to stop the military if they come for you with an assault rifle or with a pistol? But here's the thing that people don't understand. If we're completely defenseless and there's no guns whatsoever, then it's easy for any sort of insurgents, whether it's a little bit of the military or somebody else, to take over. If there's hundreds of millions of guns, if there's hundreds of millions of citizens with hundreds of millions of guns, it's not easy. And you have to understand too, I've always said this because for decades people have been complaining about martial law. That's not a new conspiracy theory. That's a reality that people have been crying about for a decade now. I've always said don't worry about martial law because all the police officers are not going to turn on our own people. All the military people are not going to turn on our own people. A lot of people say that President Trump was called upon and summoned by the military because they were starting to get fed up what was going on overseas. And that's just a little bit overseas. They think they're doing the right thing overseas. Almost every military person knows that if they start attacking citizens, they wouldn't do that. 90% of the military wouldn't do that. Probably 90% of the police force wouldn't do that. So it's not really going to like people are like, oh, you think the military, you're going to stop the military? No, but we're never going to have to stop the military because the military wouldn't turn against the United States. And if any of them did, that's why you have militias. You have people who could take on a small chunk of the military. You have, militias that could probably take on certain police forces. And I don't want it to happen. Much love and respect to the police, the military, and the militias of the United States, the thousands of them that exist. But that is why they're there. And trust me, it keeps people in check, and it keeps a lot of politicians in check. And and then other people say, well, Europe does that, and it's not happening in Europe, but it actually is happening in Europe slowly, and it's sneakily, and people don't understand it, but it is happening in Europe. I mean, you have the UN, the EU, NATO, that little weirdo clique of like Macron and Merkel. They're trying to be like old school Germany and France, bully their way around the world and decide for these other countries. And Canada's bending over. A lot of Belgium was bending over. The people, got in the yellow vest situation. There's yellow vests in France. Sweden is bending over. They're not ruling themselves. They're slowly being taken over by the EU because that's what happens when you can't defend yourself. And overall, violent crime is going way up in London and the UK. It's not on the down. There's been records in the UK for rape, acid attack, female genital mutilation, knife attacks, gun attacks, overall violent crime. Even Newsweek and Reuters admits it's because of the big migrant influx. So you're stealing freedom of speech away from your own people in Europe. You're stealing the right to defend yourself. They don't have that in most places in Europe, maybe just Switzerland. And then on top of that, you're importing migrants from another culture that are openly in certain parts of Iran and certain parts of the Middle East, they're chanting, death to America, death to America, death to Israel, death to Europe. Europe is Islam. I see it on Instagram. I search #truth, and 1 out of every 100 posts says Europe belongs to Islam now. They're not hiding it, and it's not all Islamic people. I have a lot of great Muslim friends. I'm just saying there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of people from the Middle East and Africa who don't have the same agenda as liberal Europe has, and they're seeping into Europe, and the people can't defend themselves, the people can't do anything about it, and rape and violent crime is going up because it doesn't actually go down. What they do is they say, well, gun crime is bigger in the US. Yeah, but if you add in rape and knife murder and all sorts of violent crime total, UK is going downwards. It's a downwards trend, and if you look in really gun-controlled cities, the crime is not really lowering. Chicago has stricter gun regulation than Texas, and they don't have less gun violence. It's because I don't know how big of a percent, but even I've talked to cops where I'm from, most of the crimes is committed with illegal, unregistered guns. So, and in other countries, they don't need a gun. I mean, Europe is so pathetic, you can basically beat the crap out of the police with a machete or a baseball bat because they can't defend themselves because they're running around with little batons. Like, I've seen so many videos of security guards and law enforcement from the UK just getting clowned, embarrassed by like 2 or 3 guys because they're defenseless. So these arguments that people make, which is, oh, well, you couldn't stop the military. It's not remotely true because the military is not going to come for the people. It's going to be some other sort of power grab. And trust me, people in America are very prepared, as they should be. And in Europe, it's not going well. These social networks, these social safety programs that they say are, oh, but it's working so well in France. No, it's not. It's working so well in Belgium. No, it's not. There's a reason that they're all protesting. High taxes, carbon taxes, which would be the Green New Deal on steroids, and then, a lot of other things, the banking industry included. It's not working in the UK. It's not working in Sweden. It's not working in France. It's not working in Germany. It's actually getting worse, but you're not allowed to report on it because you don't have the freedom of speech. So as it gets worse, your mouth is silenced. So you read here, oh, it's getting so much better. It's so liberal there. No, it's getting worse because you have foolish, naive people running the show who are control freak, authoritarian, fascist in the name of liberalism, who don't let people speak out. In Sweden, because the elites own most of the GDP, more than most other places in Europe, you have one of the worst presses. So they always say Sweden's running so well. No, violent crime is going up. Terrorist attacks are going up. If you search grenade attacks in Sweden, just look at the amount of grenade attacks they've had, like it's a war zone. It's not getting better. The problem is, if you say that, they call you a neo-Nazi, racist, sexist, xenophobe, and they get away with tanking the country via high taxes and via press and media control. So it's actually not working in Europe. And I'm not saying Europe's terrible. I'm just saying the First and the Second Amendment are very important, and we're losing them slowly here. Right now, it's to Democrats. Someday, maybe it'll be to Republicans. I'm just saying, this is very, very important. I don't understand people on the left. They're getting so involved in their social programs, they don't understand that they're following the path of extremist leaders. If you control the whole health industry, if you control the whole media, if you take away guns, if you start regulating speech, you're not a progressive, liberal revolutionary who's taking down the established. Congratulations, you're doing your best Hitler and Mussolini impression. Maybe minus enthusiasm and a little more racism and some other things that Hitler and Mussolini might have been, but you're doing a great impression of them. That's what they did. They didn't do it through free market values. They said, hey, give us control of everything. We'll make it better. We'll give you free stuff and motorcycles. And next thing you know, they own everything and you can't speak out against it. That's how it happens. It's not like they tell you they're going to do that. No one would do it. If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders or Nancy Pelosi told you what happens when they take away freedom of speech and when they start taking away your firearms, no one would want to do it. That's why they have to lie to you and hide it behind racism, sexism, xenophobia, the LGBT community, celebrities. They have to make it palatable. And it's also why with a lot of their shows, it's like suicide is cool now. Just close your eyes, close your eyes and you won't see the suicide. It's a metaphor. That's what people are doing now. We have skyrocketing suicide. We have a huge mental health and drug problem. And just like Bird Box tells you, just close your eyes and you won't see it. It's okay as long as you don't look at it. It's a metaphor. They plant these things there, not by coincidence. They're slowly brainwashing people to give up their rights and freedoms and watch people murder themselves and just be A-okay with it. So the First and Second Amendment are no joke, and I'm going to make a lot of videos to really try to explain that to people as kindly, calmly, and thoroughly as possible, and I think I did a pretty good job this time. And I also want to say real quick, the Fourth Amendment, which is people and government and police don't have the right to seize your home. The Mueller, I've said a lot, the Mueller investigation is basically a soft, Fourth Amendment grab where it's like, as long as we can justify, it's the Russians. Now they could shut down your media source. Ooh, it's the Russians. Now they can come and raid your home because you basically gave them the right to do it by hating Trump. You said, oh, I don't like Trump. I don't like Cohen. I don't like any of these people. So now they've justified their way to make a special counsel, which nobody voted for, brought to America by false means, by dossiers that are passed by John McCain, circle jerked around by people who have since been, kicked out of these intelligence agencies. And now they can do whatever they want because you don't like Trump. So hopefully people consider this, because the First, Second, and Fourth Amendment are no joke. And they're coming for them slowly. And people are not going to give up the Second Amendment. They shouldn't. And we're not giving up the First Amendment. This hate speech, this BS, safe space culture, although I do think conservatives can be kinder and more effective, hate speech is a very, very fine line. Free speech we should not budge an inch on free speech, and we should not budge an inch any further on the Second Amendment. They've gone far enough, and there's a reason that people need to protect themselves. It's not against duck hunting. Yes, against crime. I met a woman recently who had a crazy boyfriend who would beat her. Then she got a gun. And guess what? He doesn't beat her anymore because he's afraid of getting murdered. It stops rapes in other countries. It protects people who can't normally protect themselves. There's 101 reasons for it, and the top 2 are to protect yourself, your family, whoever else you want, and also to protect yourself against tyrannical government or an invasion of this country, all which are happening. They all are moving in that direction. It's not a maybe anymore. It's not a, no, that's crazy. It's happened before. It's happening again now. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in the United States. It's all happening. It's clear as day. And the people who want to do it are not the most trustworthy person. It's not the people who have proved to us that it's a good idea. These are people who have lied to our face, who have hid behind establishment media that even progressive left-wing people know that they're lying. These are the most dishonest, shady people who have proved that they will do everything and anything under the sun besides tell you the truth, besides make a case to you, besides get your support. They don't care about any of that, because those are there's a reason that taking away these amendments and doing all this messed up stuff always follows itself. There's a reason why certain political ideologies have a 0% success rate. It's not because they've never been done right. It's because of human nature, naivety, foolishness, selfishness, certain things that tend to go hand in hand, that when you combine them and you give all your rights, yes, these are human traits. So you want your right to protect yourself. You want your right to say whatever you want. And you want a right to not give all of your money and power up to the federal government. And I'm sorry, but left-wing policies, while they sound really nice, they're going to feed everybody and transform energy like Elon Musk on steroids. What they really mean is they're going to take a lot of money if you make a lot of money, most of your money. And if you make kind of a lot of money, they're going to take most of your money. And if you make kind of a lot of money, they're going to take that much of your money and create it so there's a huge welfare class that takes the money, a middle class that doesn't exist, and this is already happening, a upper class that is super elite and owns everything. It's not a winning strategy. And here's the thing, not only you could talk about the border, people could talk about overseas stuff, refugee crisis, which is a thing in Europe, but also, I watched a good video someone sent me on the banking industry and how, although Trump's doing great, there's a bubble that very well could pop. The whole fiat currency system is based on debt and bubbles and money that we don't have, and it always goes up and it always crashes. It goes up and crashes. No matter what Trump does, a crash might be inevitable, and who knows what could happen. At the end of the day, you want to know that you can at least for me, eat for a week or two and protect yourself. And I'm not giving up those rights. And I'm certainly not giving up my right to say whatever I want, because I know, and that what I'm saying is almost never hateful. If I do get hateful for a while, maybe it's in a joke or I get carried away. But it's not. There's no such thing as hate speech with me. It's just they're slowly seeping in on the First, 2, and the Fourth Amendment, and it's totally not cool. Share this video, tag someone in it. I'm going to post it to YouTube as well in a shorter version, so it'll be easier to watch and quicker if you want to send it to somebody. And just say 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever that was. Please consider what he's saying. Just understand that it's not all bubblegum and patty cakes. Everyone knows the government's corrupt, no matter who's running it. Trump, Bernie Sanders, they're not going to be able to drain the entire swamp as we've seen now. And it's just foolish and naive to think that giving them all of our money, power, and control while losing the first 2 amendments is somehow going to be an improvement on what we have now. It's not. This is sacrosanct to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and American values, and we should not budge another inch on it, and I'm not budging another inch. Second story, I'm going to drink my tea